Max was a decommissioned police service dog, famed for his dedication and exceptional abilities. Since being adopted by Thomas, Max had become an indispensable part of his everyday routine. Each day the duo would wander the extensive open plains and the thick woods located nearby their abode. However, a change was unfolding. Max, who had always been full of energy and fervor for their daily walks, began showing an uninterest. He seemed unwilling to give up the comfort of his bed, stared at Thomas with forlorn, distressed eyes, and even often let out soft cries without an apparent reason. Growing worried, Thomas made the decision to take Max to their veterinarian. Before we continue, if you're new here, feel free to support us by hitting like, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell to never miss our stories. Performing a thorough examination, Dr. Almeida failed to detect any health issues. Physically, Max was as healthy as a horse. Dr. Almeida postulated that he could potentially be adapting to their new living situation. However, Thomas had a gut feeling that there was more to it than a mere adjustment period. The alteration in Max's behavior had been too drastic to just chalk up to a case of resettlement. One late afternoon, Thomas, resolute on understanding what was plaguing Max's peace, decided to take him for a stroll along a new route, a path that delved more into the heart of the forest. Max appeared to be apprehensive, but obediently trotted along with Thomas. On crossing a large venerable tree, Max came to an abrupt halt. His fur stood on end as he barked in a frenzied state, all the while not taking his eyes off the tree. Thomas made attempts to soothe the distraught Max. However, the dog was unwavering in his anxiety. He sniffed around the tree and took to pawing at the bark. Intrigued, Thomas turned his attention to investigating the tree. Upon touching a section of the bark, he obviously noticed it to be slightly detached. After a bit of struggle, he succeeded in prying it off, which opened up a concealed cavity. Nestled within, laid an old sack shrouded with layers of dust and spider webs. Carefully, Thomas opened it to find an assortment of vintage personal belongings, a pocket watch, pieces of jewelry, and several monochrome photos. His heart pounded against his ribs. He sensed something was amiss. Should he hope to untangle this enigmatic discovery, he realized he needed assistance, especially for safeguarding his devoted canine. So, Thomas resolved to reach out to his old acquaintance and former colleague on the police force, John, banking on his ability to shed some light on the situation. Nightfall had just set in, and what lay in store for them in the coming hours was bound to set their world on its head. Waiting for John's arrival, Thomas was plagued with unease. He had implicit trust that his longtime friend's knowledge and experience would aid in understanding the peculiar findings in the tree. As Thomas awaited, Max seemed to mirror his restlessness, seemingly instinctively aware of a significant disclosure being on the brink. Upon John's arrival, he brought with him a spirit of resolve. His seasoned experience as a police detective equipped him for incidents such as these. "Let's see what you've unearthed, Thomason," he spoke while extending a hand in greeting and affectionately patting Max on his head. Guiding John toward the tree, Thomas pointed out the remnants of the discovery that were still present. John, donning gloves, began thoroughly investigating the items. He studied the pocket watch, pieces of jewelry, and focused on some photos, commenting quietly. Raising a picture to the descending sun, he said, "These faces seem known to me." As John continued his examination, Thomas dredged up an important detail from his memory. "You know, there were a few sudden disappearances reported around here some years back," he mentioned. His reference was to individuals who simply disappeared without leaving any trail. John, recognizing the gravity of the situation, replied solemnly, "Yes, I do recall those unsolved mysteries. Perhaps these items might be linked to those happenings." Going into a trance for a moment, he added, "We should take these to the authorities. I know people who can help identify the individuals in these photographs." Later at Thomas's house, the duo huddled at the kitchen table, scattering the recovered items across the top. Max, their faithful companion, kept a close eye on their activities from the side. One photograph, in particular, caught Thomas's attention. The picture displayed a young woman with a glowing smile. However, her eyes revealed a hint of sorrow. "This woman looks vaguely familiar," Thomas murmured, his eyebrows knitting together as he tried to remember. She closely resembles a woman who lived near our area, but that was a long time ago. John took the photo from Thomas and compared it meticulously with missing persons reports he managed to procure through his contacts. Yes, definitely. This is Jane Hopkins. She has been missing for over a decade now. She disappeared without leaving any trace behind. The mystery was thickening layers upon layers, and both Thomas and John realized that they had barely scratched the tip of the iceberg. They needed to gather more data and possibly help from others. John proposed they reach out to a specialist in criminal psychology, Dr. Rebecca Hayes. She had previously helped the local law enforcement in several complex cases. The next day saw Rebecca at Thomas's house, meeting with both men. A formidable woman, she possessed deep, piercing eyes that seemed to see beyond what appeared. As she observed the items and photographs, she instantly comprehended the magnitude of the matter at hand. "This isn't a mere case of missing individuals," Rebecca declared in a steady, unruffled voice. "It looks like we're potentially facing a case of abduction, and possibly even worse. We need to act without delay." She proposed revisiting the site where Thomas had stumbled upon the bag. There may be additional clues there that could point them towards the person responsible for these alarming disappearances. Motivated by this fresh insight and the mounting urgency, Thomas, John, and Rebecca started for the forest, led by Max. Upon reaching their destination, Rebecca started her critical examination of the area surrounding the tree. "Look here," she stated, indicating traces on the earth. "It appears as though some recent digging has occurred in this vicinity." Initiating the digging process, Thomas and John could feel an escalating sense of unease with each scoop of dirt they cleared away. At last, they discovered a small iron box, weather-beaten and grimy, concealed a few feet beneath the surface. They discovered additional personal effects, including letters and a journal. Acquiring the journal, Rebecca commenced reading it. The diary was rich with comprehensive entries describing the chronicles of Jane Hopkins' existence, with an emphasis on her increasing dread of an individual tailing her. The final entries were profoundly troubling, implying that she was well aware that time was not on her side. She was living in fear of something or somebody, Rebecca declared, looking at Thomas and John. A person she was familiar with. "We need to identify who this individual was." The inquiry was only just getting started, and the enigma around the tree and the objects discovered was becoming more sinister. Max, their ever-faithful companion, seemed to be leading them towards the truth. However, with each novel revelation, a feeling of imminent peril amplified. Thomas, John, and Rebecca understood that they were on the brink of uncovering a lethal secret and must be prepared for what was to come. As darkness descended upon the forest, the tension intensified. Thomas, John, and Rebecca felt they were dangerously close to unveiling something horrifying. Max, always vigilant, stayed near, his eyes reflecting in the increasing darkness. They assembled around Thomas's table, laying out the items in Jane Hopkins' journal. "We need to scrutinize every aspect of these letters in the diary," Rebecca declared, flipping through the aging pages. Jane was living in perpetual fear of someone. "If we can uncover the identity of this individual, we might be able to comprehend what transpired with her," Thomas agreed, sensing the severity of their situation. "Jane alludes to a name numerous times," he professed, highlighting a page. "She constantly refers to an E. This could possibly be a vital lead." John exhibited a concerned look as he perused one of the letters. "We must try to trace someone with these initials in the archives. I'll reach out to my past colleagues in law enforcement to see if they can uncover anything." During this time, Rebecca continued reading Jane's diary out loud. The diary entries portrayed a relationship that began on a positive note, but rapidly devolved into an oppressive and domineering situation. Jane inscribed details of E following her, his sudden appearances at odd places, and his threats turning progressively more malevolent. "She was caught in a constant loop of dread and manipulation," said Rebecca, a hint of sorrow seeping into her voice. "We must identify this man." John stepped forward, his face etched with somberness. "I've discovered something," he claimed. Within the data records of law enforcement, one name stood out: Edward Miller, notorious for his belligerent spirit. This man was previously involved with Jane Hopkins when she vanished. Rebecca linked the pieces together. "Now the puzzle fits," she remarked. What raises doubts is why he wasn't hauled up by the authorities, John explained. The lack of substantial evidence saved him, besides a foolproof excuse that denied our suspicion. Our search didn't get any closer to Jane's baffling disappearance. With a determined demeanor, Thomas contemplated over the newfound revelation. So we've got a cunning and potentially dangerous adversary on our hands. Let's tread carefully. Rebecca proposed an expedition to Edward Miller's ramshackled house, proximal to the woodland containing the unforgettable tree. She hoped that a more intricate exploration might surface hidden insights. Their journey transpired the subsequent day. Accompanied by their close ally, Max, they navigated the path to Edward's former residence. The property looked like an archaeological remnant, overwhelmed by vegetation, sporting shattered window panes. An aura of abandonment and deterioration prevailed. Gentle steps here. We're not certain what remains within, cautioned John. Guiding their investigation, Rebecca assessed each corner meticulously. The rooms bore testimonies of Edward's life, as personal belongings lay shrouded in dust and cobwebs. The cellar unveiled a photographic shrine dedicated to Jane Hopkins. With countless pictures and news articles adorning the room, his obsession was evident. His infatuation is apparent and unsettling, concluded Thomas, as he scanned the imagery scattered on the walls. Then the usually nonchalant Max began to display signs of interest towards a specific region of the cellar. As he furiously scratched a particular spot, he made it known that something significant lay beneath. Eager to discover the concealed treasure, John and Thomas cleared the area and unearthed a hidden doorway within the flooring. "This is both terrifying and intriguing," exclaimed Rebecca, her pulse quickening. "What could possibly be down there?" With cautious curiosity, they lifted the door to expose a staircase, leading into what seemed like a subterranean lair. Equipped with flashlights, they took to the steps in a slow and individualized manner. The odors of humidity and mildew filled the air, making it dense and stale. Descending into the unimaginable, they came across a tiny space with cemented walls. An antiquated metallic chair, fortified with chains, stood ominously in the room's nucleus. "Cold shivers just ran down my spine," confessed Thomas. "It's possible Jane was restrained in this horrifying makeshift prison," hypothesized Rebecca, visibly perturbed. "He must have confined her to this dreadful place." John studied the walls, revealing nail imprints and scratch marks. "She made futile escape attempts," he expressed in hushed tones. "But tragically, she never managed to break free." Race coursing through his veins again, Max sniffed in a frenzy, this time attracted to one corner of the room. The removal of debris led to the discovery of a metallic container, bearing a striking similarity to the one unearthed earlier near the tree. Contained within were additional messages, penned by Jane, outlining her imprisonment and frantic endeavors to break free. "All the proof we require is right here," proclaimed Rebecca, her palms quaking with tension. "This must be immediately delivered to the authorities." The revelation was on the brink of being cracked by Rebecca, Thomas, and John regarding what led to Jane Hopkins' vanishing. This fresh batch of proof was the key to finally securing justice on her behalf. However, they were well aware that Edward Miller was still at large. Hence, vigilance was essential in preparing for a possible encounter. The mystery was incrementally being unraveled, but the imminent peril hadn't subsided. The trio, with Max by their side, readied themselves for the upcoming conflict, their resolve unwavering in exposing the entire truth and ensuring Edward Miller faced the consequences of his misdeeds. As dusk fell and nighttime shadows sprawled across the woodland, the tension was palpable amongst Rebecca, Thomas, and John. They undoubtedly felt they were inching closer to the truth, yet simultaneously sensed an impending threat lurking in close proximity. It was decided that the recently acquired evidence would be brought to the station the following day, but for now, rest and preparation were urgently needed for any prospective confrontations that lay ahead. Max, forever on high alert, seemed unusually agitated. He sniffed the surroundings, emitted a low growl, and continuously scanned the encompassing forest. The diligence portrayed by his dependable comrade didn't go unnoticed by Thomas. "Something's amiss," he acknowledged to John and Rebecca. "Max is more cautious than I've ever seen." John, always the pragmatist, proposed they institute a nighttime vigil. "We should rotate shifts," he recommended. "We cannot afford to be taken by surprise." Rebecca concurred and volunteered to oversee the initial watch. "We must be primed for every possibility," she declared, her tone sturdy yet underscored by a hint of worry. As the night wore on, Rebecca patrolled the perimeter of Thomas's dwelling, keeping her senses tuned for unusual sights or sounds. Max accompanied her, appearing on edge with his senses sharply attuned. Suddenly, an odd sound disrupted the silence. The crack of a branch shattering, succeeded by stirring in the adjacent undergrowth. Rebecca came to a standstill, her gaze intensely trying to pinpoint the source of the disturbance. Max emitted a low warning growl, heightening her alertness. She signaled to Max to remain still and began creeping cautiously toward the suspicious sounds. As Rebecca neared the undergrowth, she spotted an unidentified silhouette darting between the trees. "Who is that?" she demanded, her tone assertive, yet met with no answer. The figure paused momentarily as if scrutinizing her, but then evaporated into the forest's murky depths. Rebecca hurried back to the dwelling and roused Thomas and John from their slumber. "There's an intruder on the premises," she informed them, winded. "We must be on guard." They equipped themselves with torches and makeshift weapons, poised for self-defense. Tentatively, they ventured out, led by Max. In the darkness, the dog's eyes shimmered, and their acute sense of smell guided them towards the source of Rebecca's alarm. As they traversed the woods, the sense of being under observation heightened. Soon, they stumbled upon an open space showing telltale signs of recent human presence, footprints and snapped twigs. "We're being stalked," said John, studying the footprints cautiously. "We must tread lightly." Suddenly, a shrill sound of metal splitting the air echoed around them. A gunshot resonated. Instinctively, they stooped down, seeking shelter. "Take cover!" Thomas yelled. "We're under attack!" Rebecca squinted into the inky darkness, trying to pinpoint the origin of the shot, but to no avail. "We have to get away from here," she recommended, struggling to remain composed. Max, wildly sniffing the air, began leading them towards a particular direction. "He's trying to get us to safety," Thomas figured, urging them to follow Max. They sprinted through the forest, along a convoluted path Max was leading them through, until they came upon a deserted cabin. With a quick sweep, they secured the insides, bolting the door behind them. It was a safe haven, at least momentarily. Inside, they regrouped, trying to strategize their next moves. "We need to exit in the first light and present this evidence to law enforcement," John panted. "Meanwhile, we must focus on self-defense." Rebecca carried out a quick count, ensuring everyone's safety, then reiterated the need for vigilance. She warned, "We can't predict his next move." As night unfurled, they maintained vigil, alternating between keeping lookout and resting. The dread of another assault kept them on their toes. At the crack of dawn, they prepared to take off. The indefatigable Max paved the way out of the forest, back to Thomas's residence. Upon reaching, they were worn out but grateful to have weathered the night. Swiftly, they compiled the pieces of evidence and set off towards the local police precinct. They had a niggling feeling of being tailed again, but didn't dare pause. At the police station, they were met by Captain Rodriguez, a seasoned cop who was well acquainted with John. "What do we have here?" he inquired, noting the gravity etched across their faces. "We hold key evidence that could blow open an age-old missing person query," John responded, producing the diary and letters. "And we suspect we're being trailed by the wrongdoer." Captain Rodriguez didn't waste any time. He commanded the investigation team to go through the evidence thoroughly and arrange protection for Thomas, John, Rebecca, and Max. As they awaited the verdict, an uneasy atmosphere lingered. They were aware that Edward Miller was unlikely to back down effortlessly. Rebecca, noticing Max, said, "His role in leading us to this point was pivotal. We're indeed fortunate to have him with us." Thomas stroked Max's head, expressing his thankfulness. "He's consistently demonstrated heroism," he stated, "and he'll remain a hero as long as we stick together." The inquiry was in progress, and the cops were gradually gaining ground on Edward Miller, but they recognized that the definitive clash was yet to transpire, and they must stand prepared for the upcoming threat. The truth was unraveling, and justice for Jane Hopkins was at long last in sight. The precinct was a clamor, with law enforcement officers moving about actively while detectives scrutinized the newfound proof. Thomas, John, Rebecca, and Max found themselves in an isolated space, nervously anticipating updates on the investigation. Captain Rodriguez made his entrance, his countenance serious yet unwavering. "We've discovered something," he revealed, putting a hefty parcel on the table. Jane Hopkins' correspondences and journal are substantial enough to reevaluate the case. Furthermore, we uncovered something extremely troubling. Rebecca shifted forward, her gaze fixated on the captain. "What did you uncover?" she asked. Edward Miller's name has surfaced in an array of inquiries concerning missing individuals over the span of years, each differing in locale. He didn't stay put long enough to arouse suspicion. "Until now," the captain answered. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over Thomas. Has he been operating this way for a while? How many other victims could he have claimed, he wondered aloud. "We can't be certain for now," responded Captain Rodriguez, "but this newfound evidence can help us finally apprehend him." As the precinct geared up to ensnare Edward Miller, Thomas, John, and Rebecca knew that their security was still of immediate priority. They decided on an arrangement to inhabit Thomas's home together, ensuring that a cop car was posted within the vicinity. Max, energetic and alert, appeared to sense that the climax was imminent. Throughout the late-night hours, he continued to dutifully scan the house's surroundings, releasing gentle growls at the merest hint of outdoor activity. Early in the morning, a deafening crash echoed, shattering the silent night and leaving shards of glass behind. Thomas roused from his sleep at once, Max already on high alert. John and Rebecca sprung up swiftly, seizing their torchlights and makeshift protective gear. "He's here," expressed Thomas, the hammering of his heart echoing his fear. "Stay clustered and follow Max's lead." Guided by Max's impressive instincts, the group maneuvered safely through the structure. Arriving in the living room, they were greeted by an ominous figure standing near the shattered window. There stood Edward Miller, his features contorted with hatred and insanity. "This is none of your business," Edward snarled, brandishing a firearm. "Jane got her just due, and you will be next." Before anything could happen, Max pounced on him, launching a formidable bark and going for his weapon-clad hand. The firearm tumbled to the floor with a resounding clatter. John and Thomas capitalized on the opportunity, swiftly subjugating Edward and restraining him to the ground. "It's all over, Edward," John said, catching his breath. "The law enforcement are en route." Officers came into the house moments later, clasping handcuffs on Edward and escorting him to the precinct. Surveying the scene, Captain Rodriguez gave Thomas and the others an approving nod. "Well done. Finally, we have him." In the days that ensued, word about Edward Miller's apprehension circulated through the community, instilling a feeling of retribution amongst the affected families. Jane Hopkins could now find peace. Her story was ready to be shared. Don't miss out on the previous video. Click now on the banner to the right. See you next time.